Is that right? Okay. Okay, so yeah, thanks to Camille and Ghislaine for putting together such an interesting conference theme. I'm really pleased to be here, albeit on a Friday afternoon. I just to introduce myself, I'm a reader in digital media at the University of Wolverhampton, and my particular interest is in embodied experience in the realm of the digital. And as Camille said, I'm focusing on the work of BeAnotherLab. And many of you may know it's an artist collective loosely based in Barcelona, but in reality, the 9-strong collective are sort of based all over the world, including in Brazil, Holland, and Switzerland, as well as Spain. So the image you can see here is from one of their VR projects around the Library of Ourselves, which I'll explain a little bit later. And this is a first-person perspective of a father whose son was killed whilst playing outside at the tender age of 2 years old in Brazil. And as you can see it from the first-person perspective, and the mother is in the background, and she's actually recounting the story of that loss 20 years later. So I'll talk about the way the immersive VR experiences are created a little later, and how they're facilitated by performers who enhance the embodied experience of the user, which I think is quite significant about BeAnotherLab's work. What you can see here also is a quote by neurophysiologist Rizzolatti, who you will know. So the collective used this as a tagline in their early years of the formation of the collective. And so this is the longer quote that they used. And this describes the perception of emotions, of experiencing someone else's emotions that activates the same part of our brain as when we experience the same emotions ourselves. And in fact, just to quote Rizzolatti, this shows how strong and deep-rooted is the bond that ties us to others. And in other words, how bizarre it would be to conceive of an I without an us. So I came across BeAnotherLab and their empathy VR work through a project that I initiated at the university in 2019, and that was focusing on the Starts Prize winners and nominees and the collaborative methodologies that they were using to develop work across art science through technology. And in fact, we were awarded some funding to collaborate with the Starts Prize and with Ars Electronica, who were the coordinators of the prize, to undertake our project, which was entitled Identifying Successful Starts Methodologies. So I'm sure in this audience, many of you will know that the Starts is an EU initiative. Well, it's a European Commission initiative, rather, to foster alliances between technology and artistic practice. And the focus is very much on people and projects that contribute to solving the social, ecological, and economic challenges that Europe faces. So during our research project, we interviewed over 20 artists and scientists from various projects, including some of the BeAnotherLab Collective, and this resulted in a series of case studies from the Starts Prize from 2016 to 2020. And BeAnotherLab were awarded a Starts Prize honorary mention in 2017 for their Library of Ourselves. So as part of the dissemination of the project, we held a physical exhibition in the Made in Walls Gallery at the university, and this was actually then presented at the then virtual Ars Electronica in 2020 during the pandemic. And we had a number of other online events, including a roundtable entitled Mapping Collaborative Practice. And this included 2 members of the collective, Christian Shireen and Norma De Secche, This is actually on our the university YouTube channel. It's, I think, a really interesting roundtable. So it's there for everyone to see still. So the BeAnotherLab was formed as a collective 10 years ago now, in 2013. And it was actually from a group of master's students all studying at Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona. And really what was significant about the way they were formed is that their mutual interest was around both embodied narrative and embodied cognition. And they were studying various of the various MAs across Pompeu Fabra. And the collective have a background here. You can see a really wide-ranging background. And what's interesting about the members is that many of them have at least 2 specialisms. Some, in fact, it was Philippe Bertrand and Marty Rowell, went on from their master's degrees to study PhDs in neuroscientific research, at times also using the system that they developed. So their shared passion was to create what they termed an embodiment system that enables others to see themselves in the body of another, but not through a computer-generated image, but through the body of a real human being, which I think is a significant aspect of their work. And I think what was also really interesting, you can read in the paper some of the quotations from the interview with Marty Rowell, but where he talked about his understanding of embodied experience and how he understands the body as an almost liquid entity that is boundless in some way. And this makes it difficult to define its boundaries, both objectively and subjectively. And this in turn gives it a capacity to embody what he terms radically different bodies. So they developed 3 types of projects. I mean, at the center is the machine to be another. But the first the first system that they developed was the machine classic, which facilitated a body swap for 1 person. And the second person is the performer, which you can see on the top right image. The second is the machine to be another. And this is effectively the 2-way body swap, where there is no performer as such, but the users become the performers. And as some of you will know, they gained quite a lot of media attention for their gender body swap, which you can see in the top left-hand image as well. What I think is interesting about what Philippe Bertrand says about how they developed this machine to be the other is how it attempts to address this relationship between identity and empathy. And he writes, really how the project merges performance with protocols and neuroscience experiments in really to kind of deepen the immersive experience of seeing yourself in the body of another person. So the third project type, it's like an ongoing project of pre-recorded narratives, which they term a form of embodied storytelling. And this is, there's one user who listens to and watches a narrative, and there is a second person usually who is the performer, who is also enhancing the experience through touch and smell, which I'm going to talk about in particular now. So typically then, the point of view filming is from a first person perspective, as you can see here. In this case, it's the balcony of a female refugee in Jordan, taken from a collaborative project that the collective undertook with a researcher from the University of Birmingham. And I think this collaboration really highlights the potential of the BeAnotherLab system and the Library of Ourselves project. And they kind of term it a kind of research toolkit. So when I visited the collective in Barcelona in the end of 2019, I think it was, they actually waited to have a group debrief from this project, so I could sit in on it and kind of really understand what their working processes were. And Daniela and Norma had just spent 2 weeks filming in Jordan, and they'd sort of met with various Syrian and Iraqi women refugees who'd all moved to Jordan for various different reasons. And it was actually Yafa Shanique here. She's a lecturer in religious studies at the University of Birmingham, and she was funded by the British Academy to kind of develop her research, which really focuses on dynamics of gender in Islam within the contemporary diaspora, and really how different Muslim marriage practices change with different power relationships because of the diaspora. So over the period of the trip, they made 4 BR films, and 4 films were told by Syrian refugees who fled to Jordan. And the image here is of a film about remembering the simple things about Iraq and around Baghdad. And again, it was really, their memories were really really sense-based memories around the sound of birds or the smell of fresh fruits, and in this case, the application of henna to their hands. So the Library of Ourselves is used really as a research, well, as an artistic research method, and it can help the storyteller to mediate and share their memories and stories creatively. Now here, Daniela is working with one of the storytellers, and you can notice that how often the use of hand touching is used in their narratives, and this can be replicated by the performer then when a user is experiencing the narrative, and this kind of further impacts on the embodied experience of the user. And I actually experienced this firsthand when I met them. They set up a couple of narratives for me to experience. And of course, I knew my hand was being touched, but beyond that, when I took off the VR headset, I didn't realize that they had a whole box of different props that they were using, such as perfumes and feathers and various other props that I was completely unaware of. And I think that really enhanced my embodied experience of those narratives. And I write about that in a couple of other places as well. So finally, what is striking to me about the collective is that the strength of their work comes from their interdisciplinary approach. The term different ways of knowing was an emerging theme in our research project. And to me, it chimes well with the work of BeAnotherLab. In my interview with Christian Shireen, he talked about their interest in working in the kind of spaces between fields, and how in turn they see the limitations of their own disciplines. And that's where kind of working across at least 2 disciplines really helps. And really working in an interdisciplinary way addresses the failings of their disciplines, each discipline. And the final remark I want to make is in response to what Ghislaine mentioned yesterday around issues of authorship. When I interviewed the collective, in the end I interviewed them individually, and I asked them about their work as a collective, and every one of them said that the work that they did would not be possible without them acting as a collective, and the values that this embeds in their practice, essentially. So I think that's a really interesting point and a real strength about their work. Now, that's the end. I think I've kept it to less than 15 minutes.
Ah, it's fantastic. Thank you. More time for questions.